most financial service providers are men. It's in the 90 something percentage. And there are tons of studies that show that women actually are not entirely comfortable having a financial conversation with men just because of experience. And I've had my experiences where I've gone to a financial service provider to invest. And the question was like, where is your husband? Where did you get this money?
Wow.
So
Hey there, everybody. Dominique Henderson here, and have another conversation in finance with special guest Bola Sokunbi. She is of the Clever Girl Finance brand, and I had an opportunity to sit down with her recently, and we chopped it up about many of things. And I always love to see what the money story of my particular guest is, since this is a podcast focused on talking about finance. And here is what Bola had to say about her money story.
So personal finance is something that I have always been interested in. From how I was raised, my parents were very particular in teaching me about, being smart about money, not being a liability on anyone, including myself. And so I always had this interest, especially as a female, especially as a woman of color, watching my mom get married really young without a college education, navigating her life and watching her friends go through different financial circumstances like divorces or a death of a spouse, and just not having anything on the other side because they had no idea how their spouse was managing the finances, or they were not on any of the legal documents that gave them ownership or rights to anything. So, that's one of the things my mom always enforced, reminded me of, like, make sure you understand. And she took it upon herself to go back to school, earn her own money, and eventually become a contributor to our household in a major way. So always stayed with me. And coming out of college, I got a job earning, in New York City, and I wanted to save. And that's part of, my interest in money and finances was part of what drove me to save that $100,000, in my early 20s. But, as I started to get older and navigate life as well, getting married, having kids, I started to see some of the things that my mom would talk about when I looked around my friends. My friends would always ask me, how do you invest? How did you save? What are you doing? Because I would tell them I was saving. And sometimes, depending on what friend it was, I would tell them how much money I had saved or what I had earned in an investment and things like that. So they're always asking me. And then I started seeing some friends go through divorces or go through like just negative situations in life. And just finances was just always this huge barrier that didn't give them, because they didn't have it, they didn't have options to do other things or to make change or to, overcome the situation. And so I was in this space where I had just had my twins, and I was looking for something that was more fulfilling. My job I loved my job, but it wasn't like the legacy I wanted to leave. And I started thinking about what was I going to do, and everything I did boiled back to like personal finance. So I started out with a blog where I just talked about my personal experiences with money, how I saved, how I invested, how I had saved 100K, and it kind of grew from there. So I'm a child of immigrants. My parents can tell me to save, but they can't really tell me how to save in a different country. So the first landmark was the first credit card I ever got in college. My parents didn't operate on credit. They didn't have credit cards because it wasn't part of, the financial structure where we came from, which was Nigeria. So my mom that was not a conversation we ever had, and I got into trouble with that first credit card, getting into debt that I didn't understand the interest rate. I didn't know how to pay off. Another big financial milestone was getting my first job and being talked to about a retirement plan and a 401k. Again, that's not something my parents could talk to me about because they had no idea what a 401k was, talk less of investing in the US stock market. Like, what is that? So that's another thing I had to figure out. And just even navigating how to budget and what kind of bank accounts to put my money, what kind of brokerages to use, like all these little nuances that they're not things that you would sit down and say, oh, let's have a conversation about your trust fund at Fidelity. you know
Non-existent.
Yeah, we weren't talking about that. Getting married, I also come from a culture where, once you get married, you become your husband's problem. Nobody was like, oh, this is how you manage your finances with your husband. This is how you have joint accounts versus not joint. I had to figure out a lot of these things. So my parents definitely set a foundation where they talked to me about, they gave me the values, like save, cut your coat according to your size, penny wise, pound foolish. That was my dad's favorite.
I love that.
And then just based on that foundation, based on those values, I took it upon myself to figure things out. So watching videos, reading personal finance books, reading blogs, and just figuring out all the things that I didn't get from my parents that they wouldn't have been able to help me navigate anyway, because they themselves didn't know.
One of the reasons I was so excited to talk about Bola is because as a financial educator and financial coach, her lens is a little different than mine in the regulated version of the industry. And I wanted to see specifically maybe some of the thought process or the conversations that she thinks that financial coaches should be having in this industry. And this is what she said.
So, I think for someone who is considering becoming a financial service provider as a female to a female audience, one thing to keep in mind is that you are unique, right? Most financial service providers are men. It's in the 90 something percentage. And there are tons of studies that show that women actually are not entirely comfortable having a financial conversation with men just because of experience. And I've had my experiences where I've gone to a financial service provider to invest. And the question was like, where is your husband? Where did you get this money? You
Wow.
know, so, so given that perspective, just think about the things that you would have concerns about when it comes to like your finances and the angle in which you would talk about it, right? So a lot of personal finance today is very like strong and like, you know, even color wise, like the strong blacks, the blues, the reds, like very like male, nothing against that. But,
That's a good point. I never
we're
thought about that.
we're female, we have a different touch. Some of us like pink, we like girly stuff, we like beauty and makeup. That doesn't mean that we cannot be, wealthy. And there are women who like the strong colors, but we kind of like have our own approach, right? A lot of, if you look at sports, if you look at finance shows, a lot of it is based on sports psychology, right?
Which
They
gravitates
use like,
towards the male. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that's because the industry is very male dominated. And so think about the voice and tone that you would like to be spoken to, or, provide a service for, and use that for your client. Because as a female, generally other females will, because you're having conversations with your girlfriends. And for me, being able to glean upon the conversations I have with my girlfriends is very insightful as to the types of, the language and the offering and the products that we use, that we offer to our potential students or customers to use. So it's all about the angle. Obviously financial advice is financial advice, it's very structured, but the delivery really matters, especially if you're trying to target a female audience. So think about yourself and how you would want to be provided a service or talked to, or, we all love sports, but we don't necessarily want to talk about basketball all day.
Or football for that matter. Yeah.
Exactly.
With very little effort, you'll find quickly that Bola and Clever Girl Finance are all over the web and they are honed in on their market. And I wanted to know how she got there, how she views that particular strategy, and what she thinks of other forms of social media marketing.
The blog was very useful because number one, it helped us create a voice, right? Because I was creating content, right? So that was content on the sharing stories, my tips and ideas, and that was essentially the beginning of a voice for the brand. And then it also helped to drive engagement because people would come and read it and share their feedback and ask additional questions, and it will give us insights and ideas for new content. It also made us searchable. So, content is really pivotal to our brand today because a lot of people find us organically through Google search or social media search. So it made us searchable. The fact that we had our little tiny little corner on the internet somewhere, when somebody searched for a particular topic that was unique to them as a female or as a woman of color, they would, occasionally our relevant content will come up and people would find us. And because they like the content we're providing, they would share it, which would bring more eyes onto that piece. So the blog is definitely instrumental. And also when you think about a blog, that is your home base. That is content that you own. It's almost foundational content that you can use to create many things, right? So your blog is a foundation for a script for a video or a script for a podcast, or you can take snippets of it and use it for Twitter posts or Instagram posts. So it's almost like this foundational piece that you create that can be turned into many things, and you own that content, right? People come to your site, they read your blog, they give you their email address, you own that audience. Whereas on social media, Facebook or Instagram or Twitter can decide to change their algorithm. They can go out of business today and you lose all the content and you lose all the audience there because you don't own those people or that content, and it's in the fine print. Just because you upload your photo doesn't mean anything. Facebook owns that photo now because you put it on their platform. So
That's right.
the blog is very instrumental. So the blog was just, initially just writing my tips, my tricks. And then I was like, wait a minute, okay, I see that some of my audience is on Facebook, for example. I should just share this blog post there. And there's engagement. Okay, maybe I can take a little bit from this blog post, these highlights, and just really dive deep into it with a particular Facebook post or Instagram post on this particular point, and leverage that. And so we have a very large, broad social audience and a lot of reach, but it really just started with one, right? It started out with Instagram, and that was where we focused. And we figured out how to make that work for us, how to engage with our audience, how to grow our audience. And then once we had it churning along, we shifted on to the next thing. Pinterest or Facebook or, Twitter. But it was really focusing. But our priority was always creating the content in our home base first, because we owned that, and then thinking about what ways we could use to amplify that content on the social, or use the social platforms to amplify that content.
I wanted to ask Bola, regardless of taking the traditional or the non-traditional route to financial advice, what she thought and what you needed as the number one thing. Here's what she had to say.
I think with any career, for finance aside, you want to have some level of passion, some level of enjoyment for what you do, because otherwise you won't be able to sustain what you're doing long term. I think it's just really what your interest is, right? So me personally, I love to teach and I love to share, and so I'm a financial education instructor slash financial educator. And the CFP, I think, is a really awesome space. I'd love to see more women going down that route. That's something that I had
less than
considered.
1.5% right now.
Yes, I had considered it. However, for what I like to do, like teach and share opinions and share thoughts and have dialogue, there's some level of restrictions as to what I can and cannot say.
Not some, you're being generous. A lot.
There is a lot. And, I thought about that. I was like, that will kind of limit my idea for the brand, right? Because we also share a lot of people's stories. We tend to be neutral. We're not particular to any type of financial product or service, so I like being the educator, but I think it's very valuable to have female certified financial planners, because women want people that can guide them with specific investment advice, that can be fiduciaries around products and services that they don't understand, that have lots of complexities. So we explain it in a general perspective. But if I want to know about this product from this company on this date, then, it's a good idea to sit with a financial planner, and not just that, but all the other things that come with creating an overall full financial plan. So it really depends on what your level of interest is. Are you really interested in the investing? Are you really interested in the insurance piece? Are you really interested in the education piece? Do you want to coach and work one-on-one with people? Just start with that first, or just test it out, right? So I tested out one-on-one coaching initially, and I gained a lot of insights from that, and that helped me decide to become an educator. So it really depends on where your interest is. Some people just really want to sit down and talk about investing in stocks and bonds all day long, and talk about what they're doing, and maybe that makes you an excellent investment advisor. So it really depends on what you truly want to do.
In somewhat of a tangent from our conversation, I was curious on what she thought about the student loan crisis and what she thought that students can do as well as providers of the loans could do to fix the problem.
So I think, like the student loan crisis is real. It's not going anywhere anytime soon, because the cost of education is going up. People need to go to school to get those degrees, to get those jobs. And I think as a financial service provider, which is where I feel like the big corporations have fallen short, is when you're talking about student loan debt, right? From a financial services perspective, it is a product, right? You're selling the debt to make money on interest, and it's debt that people need to go to school. It's kind of like the mortgage, right? However, I think it's on us to educate the consumer as to how it actually works and how to leverage their student loans so that they minimize how much they take on, right? Being able to understand, is your degree going to be able to afford you a job that can pay off this loan you're taking to go to that school? Or should you think about going to a different school that costs less, or changing your degree? Like, we need to be able to provide our clientele, our potential students, new students, with information that helps them make informed decisions about the products they're going to take on, because they will take on this product anyway because they want to go to school, but they don't need to take on more debt than they actually need to have, right? And also just really, one of the biggest challenges people come to Clever Finance with is that they don't even understand how the loans work, the complexities around them, what they signed, the promissory note, the amortization on the loan, all of these different things when it's due. I think if we're able to inform properly, we're going to build loyalty, right? And these are people that will stick with you because these are people that are going to, raise families, build assets, so you're not going to, just because the product is not putting out this big massive loan doesn't mean that you don't build a client base that you're able to build a good revenue cycle from. You will, because you've established loyalty. So I think the education is really key. Keeping them informed, helping them make informed decisions, not making them feel blind, right? It's like when you go to sit with a doctor for a surgery, they're going to sit down and tell you, this is everything that's going to happen. These are all the complications. This is the anesthetic that we're going to use. This is how long it's going to take. And then you go into the surgery having a level of peace. Okay, I know what to expect. And then the other side, I know how to plan for my recovery after this surgery. That's the same approach we need to take for this student loan debt. As financial planners, you are typically working with people who have started earning a good amount of income. They're probably coming to you when they're going through a major life transition, like since getting married and having kids. And as part of that whole financial planning, it would be a conversation. Oh, you should bring your daughter and she's planning to go to college. Just talk about how that makes sense. It's almost like helping your client pass the value down, because then that young adult can eventually become a client to you, and they now trust you that you're educating them and not making them just sign on the dotted line. So,
Yes, and females ask those questions. They think about asking those questions so much more than men.
and for a student who's in college signing on debt or has debt, the first thing I would say is understand what you've signed. Understand the regulations, understand the interest rates, understand the benefits, understand what happens if you decide to start making payments now or make extra payments or want to pay off your loan earlier because you're working hard and putting extra money. Know everything you signed up for. One of the biggest questions I get as well, or comments, is that, I went to college, I'm graduating from college, but I signed so many things, I don't know how many loans I have. Pull your credit report, understand your big picture, understand your interest rates, prioritize your debt accordingly so that you can create a plan. You have to know. And also, you don't need to take on debt for everything, right? You can work part-time when you're in school. You don't need to take on debt to buy textbooks if you can work a part-time job to pay for your textbooks.
Do you hear that, Peyton and Dominique?
So a lot of times student loans are in excess of the actual tuition. It's like room and board. You can live at home with mom and dad. They might get on your nerves, but guess what? You're saving tens of thousands of dollars of debt that's going to be compounded with interest. So just be very mindful about when you're signing a agreement for a student loan check or for a loan. Do I absolutely need to get this?
I was very happy that Bola shared some parting advice for 3 things that anybody can do to get started in this industry.
I mean, the personal finance space is a competitive industry, right? But so is every other industry. And I think you just have to set the intention to put in the work. So when I started Clever Finance, I was not a writer. I was not a marketer. I didn't know anything about social media. I was not a content creator, but I figured it out. I started by writing on a blog. I started by learning how to create a YouTube video. I started by learning how to create a podcast. I started reading marketing blogs and marketing books. There is a wealth of information that can help you get started. And you just need to start with one thing: starting the website, starting a schedule for your blog posts. You get that going. What's the next thing you can do? Okay, social media. I have all these blog posts I've created. That's all material for like my Instagram posts. I just need to get a designer or someone, or go on a tool myself and create some posts and start sharing. And it's all about putting the effort and testing things out. When you're building a business, the skill set to run your business as the expert, as a financial planner or educator, is great, but you need more than that, right? You need to learn how to be a marketer. You need to learn how to share. You need to be comfortable going out to places and say, hey, listen, I have this platform called XYZ. I would love for you to check it out. Use your friends and family as your guinea pigs. I did that. They read my blog post, and guess what? For every 10 people I sent it to, one person would say, okay, you know what? This is my niece. She's cute, but I have a coworker that this might help, and they would share it to that person. So it takes time to build a business. It takes time to build a brand, but you have to put in the effort. I think a lot of us are in this space where everything is sensationalized on social media, where everyone and everything seems like an overnight success. Started today, blew up tomorrow. You know, it doesn't work like that. And to
No, it does
become
not.
that overnight success, you have to put in the work. And so don't, like you said, people will look at Clever Finance and be like, oh my God, wow, they have all these things going on. But it started with one blog post. It started with one Instagram post. It started with one thing. And then I just kept going and I did the next thing and I tested it out and I did the next thing. So don't get discouraged, and find what your uniqueness is when it comes to how you want to deal with your clients and what angle you want to come from and what you want to sell. And don't be afraid to test. You test, you learn, you keep moving.
Well, I immensely enjoyed the conversation with Bola. Her wisdom and her insight, her advice, with all the things that she's gone through and she's accomplished with, learning everything basically on her own, and building the brand to where she's got it now was just so inspiring. Now, this was not our full talk, our full conversation. If you want that, make sure you check down in the show notes. I'll have the link to the full interview that we had on my website, and you can check that out and get a little bit more insight on what Bola is doing and how you can maybe even start to break into this industry using some of the strategies and the tips that she's used to grow Clever Girl Finance to where it is today. Thank you for watching, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.